Good morning to everyone again. It's exactly 12 o'clock in Almaty time. I think it's time to start counting down and probably to start our meeting. I could see most of our speakers are online now. We could see how many. So I could see probably most of them. So if you don't mind, I will start our session with short introduction. My name is Rafiz Abazov. I'm Honorary Director for Ban Ki-moon Institute for Sustainable Development. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, we can hear you.
And I will be moderating this session. We have about 90 minutes for full session, and we have keynote speakers, and we have welcoming presentations, and we have presentation from experts in the field. Please try to keep your presentation short. Please try to follow schedule, and we hope we will have enough time for short Q&A, for short discussion. Without further ado, I would like to announce our session on Sustainable Development Goals number 4, Quality Education, open. And I would like to invite for welcoming speech and opening remarks, Ms.
Mr. Rafiz, I need to make housekeeping announcements. So let me just start.
Okay, please.
Yes. Okay.
Make housekeeping announcements.
Yeah. Good morning, dear participants. Welcome back to day 2. Since we are joined by different participants today, most of you have joined us yesterday already, but some of you are new. Let me repeat the housekeeping announcements. My name is Natalia Wehmer. I'm from ESCAP and I'm your MC for this forum. So please keep your microphone on mute when you don't speak and to minimize background noises. When you do speak, please speak slowly because we have interpretation. Please mute the floor language when you speak to avoid an echo effect. And please feel free to turn on your camera to facilitate interactions. If you have any questions during the discussions, please put them into chat and we will follow up on them. Also, on behalf of the interpreters, I need to inform you of the following as a disclaimer. The remote simultaneous interpretation of the proceedings is provided by the United Nations for the purpose of facilitating communication in the light of the fact that there are 6 official languages of the United Nations. Participants are requested to be mindful of the additional difficulties experienced by interpreters when working in remote mode and of the increased likelihood of disruptions to the audio feed to the interpreters. Only the speech or intervention in the original language is authentic and constitutes an authentic record of the proceedings. In case of any inconsistency between the interpretation and the speech or intervention in the original language, the latter shall prevail. Interpreters servicing remote meetings cannot be held liable for interruption of service, pixelation, freezing or loss of visual input, partial or complete loss of audio, audible or artifacts, unauthorized access to personal or confidential data, leaking of information due to inadequate soundproofing, and or data loss. So that is the end of the disclaimer. And now it is my understanding that we first give the floor to our co-organizers from Tajikistan, Mr. Atajan Atayev, Head of the Department of Strategic and Sustainable Development of the Ministry of Finance and Economy of Turkmenistan, to say a few words on Turkmenistan's Day of Remembrance and to hold a minute of silence. Mr. Atajan, can I give you the floor?
Спасибо, уважаемая Наталья, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Thank you, distinguished Natalia, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome all of you here. Today we have Memorial Day on the national level, and we have events devoted to this Memorial Day. As you know, back in 1948, overnight from 5th to 6th of October in Ashgabat and adjacent territory. They experienced one of the most disastrous, devastating earthquakes globally, when more than 90% of all buildings were destroyed, and that actually affected all families at that time. And due to that fact, I would like to urge you just to commemorate this Memorial Day with a minute of silence. Thank you.
Спасибо большое всем.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Madam Wemer, the floor goes to you, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atajan. I now hand over back to Mr. Rafiz Abbasov, the moderator for this session.
Hello again. Let's move forward with our session. I believe it's a very important session when we talk about education. As a person who was in the field of education for more than 20 years, I believe it's a very important field which contributes to development. And in post-COVID, we hope we'll talk about post-COVID environment will contribute to recovery, economic, social recovery, and gaining opportunities to move forward without losses and addressing all important issues. Without further ado, I would like to introduce first speaker with welcoming remarks, Ms. Michiko Enomoto, Deputy Head of Sub-Regional Office for North and Central Asia, ESCAP. Please, floor is yours. Ms. Michiko.
Здравствуйте. Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the session on quality education of the 5th North and Central Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal number 4 aims to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes that education at all levels and the support for its improvement are the important pillars of sustainable development. SDG4 encompasses all levels of education from pre-primary to higher education. It covers all dimensions such as success to quality and equitable learning, universal literacy and numeracy, skill development through enabling inclusive and effective learning environment, and lifelong learning opportunities for all and leaving no one behind. On behalf of ESCAP, Sub-Regional Office for North and Central Asia, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Turkmenistan for holding this important scientific and cultural organization, UNESCO, and United Nations Children Fund for co-organizing this session. I look forward to the views of distinguished experts and active participation.
Dear Mr. Abazov, I think Ms. Michiko has technical issues, but her speech also was concluded. So please continue with the next point.
It's pity. I know Ms. Michiko for many years, and she has also experience in the field. And it's very pity that we lost her due to technical issues. And unfortunately, we have to move forward to our next speaker. Next speaker is Ms. Meirgul Alpusbayeva, Educational National Professional Officer, UNESCO Almaty Cluster Office for Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Ms. Meirgul, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Rahmet. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good day, distinguished colleagues, representatives of the Ministry of Education, partners, participants. On behalf of the Cluster Office of UNESCO in Almaty, we are glad to welcome all of you at the fifth session of the fifth North and Central Asian Multi-Stakeholder Forum on implementation of SDGs devoted to the quality education. First of all, I would like to thank our colleagues from ESCAP and Unicef for organizing this session. SDG4 ensures quality education and equal education, lifelong education for everyone. So it is just recognized as a fair factor which has which underpin achieving all SDG 17 for within Agenda 2030. In spite of the big progress of countries in SDG 4, the pandemic just affected this sector globally and deteriorated inequalities in the educational field. Therefore, it is important to monitor the progress attained by all countries in order to attain all targets within SDG 4, thus building and streamlining all elements. According to the data, North and Central Asia countries are lagging behind in some targets. For example, like preschool education, equality, in some of them just they show regress, like quality education to access to quality education. Therefore, our session will focus on preschool and equal access to the education in two sub-regions. We hope that it will, this today event will just allow countries to identify approach to SDG 4, which will help the countries to ensure quality and fair education for everyone. We hope that it will just bring fruitful results. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Meirgul, for very short and very insightful introduction and covering that issue. And let's move forward to next speaker, Mr. Parmosev Sorayan, Regional Educational Advisor, UNICEF, Europe and Central Asia Regional Office. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this important event in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in the North and Central Asia region. Two important features of this meeting make it particularly important. One, it is focused on a specific region. Two, it is a multi-stakeholder event. This allows for collective endeavor in response to the specific challenges in the region. It is therefore a welcome privilege for UNICEF to participate in this forum. This meeting comes at a time when we are all aware of the urgency to build back better after the unprecedented disruption of learning in human history. To achieve the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, therefore calls for our collective leadership to recover from COVID-19 and rethink how we respond to the challenges in education in all countries and for all children. As we review the SDG4 progress and collectively identify priority interventions, we remain aware of the scope of the challenges and the need to build back better. While there's been impressive progress prior to COVID-19 pandemic, there are still key challenges that remain, such as low enrollment in preschool education, the relevance of skills for livelihoods, gender disparity, low and unequal achievement, especially for the most vulnerable children. The learning losses caused by COVID-19 threatens to roll back the significant progress towards achieving the SDG4 targets evident in the region since 2015. While the impact is universally significant, the impact on the most vulnerable is particularly severe. However, the crisis offers us an opportunity to rethink education. There are impressive examples across countries in the region where the power of digitalization is being leveraged to address challenges in education, even those that existed prior to COVID-19. Foremost, we have seen significant progress in the area of preschool education. As we know, investing in early childhood education and development is an important investment for learning achievements later in the learning cycle. Despite recent progress in improving enrollment in preschool, much more needs to be done. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the urgent need to strengthen the capacity of education systems across the region. We continue working with governments towards achieving this in the area of system strengthening. Unicef is guided by the child's rights and promotes inclusive education systems with equity as the fundamental principle to help all children to meet their fullest potential, especially children with disabilities and the most vulnerable. This ambitious agenda cannot be achieved by any one stakeholder working on their own. Success depends on a participatory, multi-stakeholder approach with a common focus on inclusive education. This is our common mission. This is the call to action that we are all committed to answering in our deliberations today and in the work that will follow this forum. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parmaseva. It was very interesting, useful overview of the situation and overview of the challenges. And we are grateful to your input. Next, let's move to keynote speaker and his keynote speech entitled Modern Trends and Innovative Approaches in Teachers Training in Times of COVID. We have here a small change from initial program, and we will have Her Excellency Ms. Bibigul Asylova, Vice Minister of Education and Science of Kazakhstan. Here I would like to switch to Russian language to greet Ms. Bibigul Amangeldievna and invite her to speak to the panel in Russian.
Бибигуль, мы приглашаем вас к микрофону. Thank you. I am very glad to welcome all the forum participants. Historically, when we're discussing the implementation of sustainable development goals, traditionally we're focusing on the key role of a teacher, which in the history of Central Asia always plays an important enlightenment role as an authoritative figure in society. Symbolically, it is very important to outline the continuous education of teachers in the framework of International Teachers' Day. Within 18 months already, it's supposed to be my slides. The organizers should share my screen and demonstrate you my slides. Okay, thank you very much. For 18 months already, the world educational system works under big pressure, where it is important not only to answer the challenges of the pandemic, but to find the new approaches in order to update all educational processes. My second slide, please. This course specifically was picked up by Kazakhstan, where during the pandemic, we've got more demand in ICT. And when we're talking about teachers, we have to make a special focus on upgrading their distant training skills. Of course, it is a big stress for everyone in terms of professionalism and limitation in social life. Under these difficult conditions, the support of our educators is given in the framework of continuous professional education. In terms of this approach, which includes their training, retraining, and refresher courses, we are focusing on the following directions. Next slide, please. First of all, we are focusing on online training of teachers for distant learning, which is a transformation from critical to innovative format, which should be matched with all international standards in terms of technical assistance and the content of online courses. Here, I would like to name accomplished and those projects which are still in progress in our country. First of all, development free online courses for teachers and students of teaching institutions and universities, preparation educational processes, development their computer literacy. Up to 84% is covered with this type of courses for the young teachers. Next is development of the best scholars and teachers, the content, the curricula for digital lessons from 1st to 11th grade. Currently, this curricula for digital lessons are available in our own platform, at the YouTube platform, and on the Khabar and Balapan educational channels in Kazakhstan. The second focus is developing of special curricula to train our teachers. Slide number 4, please. Launching the training programs for our teachers and new refresher courses. One of the important thing is to make an access on psychological training of key specialists and exposure them to the training practices. This is a very important task to encompass all teachers with these new training materials. Considering the pandemic, we are also launched refresher courses and technology for online services in digital educational institutions, as well as psychological training for our teachers, positive psychology, social and emotional training, and cybersecurity for educational process. I also have to admit that we had, before development these courses, the National Monitoring Survey, which helped us to understand our respondents' attitude to the digital education. Third is training of our teachers under the circumstances of informal training. We would like to raise our teachers' digital competencies with the new attestation rules. This new attestation rules encompasses the so-called authors, digital lessons, and other digital resources development. 18 months ago, we foresaw different scenarios for the pandemic. We believed that the pandemic will be over very soon. However, it turned out that we're facing the fourth wave of the Corona-19 pandemic, and that is why we have to live with the pandemic, and this is our new reality. That is why when we are training our teachers, the pandemic becomes the starting point of retraining our teachers. We gain positive experience based on the events of the past 1.5 years. What next? New opportunities given to our trainers is the focus, with a focus on new activities such as professional orientation for the alumni of educational institutions, renewing the educational content for our curricula, developing the apprenticeship system for the young teachers and focusing on the practices as well as material and non-material incentives. What we have done so far in these directions, first of all, we are preparing new programs and establishing new schools of pedagogical volunteering and leadership. With the raise of a scholarship to the students of pedagogical institutions, we also set up new requirements for certification of alumni of educational institutions, and they have to pass a special test in order to become a teacher. We integrate formal tertiary education as well as with the refresher courses for educators. Within the third year since the adoption of the law on the status of teachers, we establish mentoring or apprenticeship programs for young teachers at schools. We Kazakh say that the times of challenges, it is also change of opportunities. And I believe that we do all understand the meaning of this ancient wisdom. And that is why I hope that our teachers will celebrate the International Teachers' Day at the highest possible level and make our children happy. Thank you for your attention. Many thanks, Bibigul, for your report. In the UN systems, there's such a motto: think globally, act locally. And that is why your case, the case of Kazakhstan, is extremely useful.
Minister of Education, Bibigul Asilova. It was very interesting presentation of case study of Kazakhstan. United Nations has a wonderful motto: think globally, act locally. And the case study of local experience in Kazakhstan, I believe it's very insightful, very useful. And now we had presentation, and we have a small discussion about status quo and projections for targets of SDG4 in North and Central Asia. What should governments and other stakeholders do to ensure progress and to leave no one behind? Ms. Mirgul Alpesbayeva, Educational National Professional Officer, UNESCO Almaty Cluster Office for Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, will be speaking. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Спасибо. Разрешите делиться своим экраном.
Let me start sharing my screen first.
Мой экран видно, да?
I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes. Да, видно.
Добрый день еще раз. Еще раз всех рада поприветствовать.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you once again. As you know, in 2015, we all adopted a global development agenda on 2030, including 44, and also educational agenda for development until 2030, which encompassed all measurements and indicators in this area, because education at all levels is a key basis for sustainable development. And that is why it was underscored the important role of high-quality education.
Были отмечены также три основные...
Three main aspects were just specified: equality, inclusiveness, and lifelong learning, which are attained through 10 targets of SDG4, which I'm going to talk about at my next slides. First of all, I would like to say in general, so about the progress in Central Asian countries in the field of attaining SDG4. So you can see at the slide, so the indicators at which countries attain their progress. In some of them, for example, in the coverage of preschool education, as well as teachers training, it is still necessary to make certain steps. And in addition, in several indicators, regress is still observed, and therefore it is necessary to pay special attention to equality index in relation to the inequality indices and the literacy in reading and math. And of course, so for this progress shows certain reveals certain trends in the country and region, sub-region. We can see certain areas and of these trends. I'm not going to go into detail in order to save time, but I would like just to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic impact on educational sector, as well as attaining SDG, because the pandemic, of course, had an effect on the existing progress that had existed prior to the pandemic. And in some cases, even just stepped back, and therefore, or just gave the reverse direction. And I would say that, so it is expected that the scoring and of average student achievements will decline up to 6% in Europe and Central Asia in average. And therefore, the countries should just pay attention to the loss of knowledge. If you're talking about each target in brief, quite recently, a report was published by our regional office for ATP, which includes Central Asian sub-region, for 5-year progress of attaining SDG4 in all targets. And today's presentation is based on this. And it was our office also published sub-regional report on lifelong education, which considers topical issues of SDG4. Even brief, so target 4.1, we all know that the countries of North and Central Asia just attained complete coverage with primary and secondary education. So good progress is shown here, which was actually a consequence of Soviet education of the past times. But still, attention is needed to be paid to the quality and content of primary and secondary education. 4.3 target related to the equal access to the education. I'm not going to
из уязвимых слоев населения, из этнических меньшинств, поэтому странам, конечно, необходимо уделять на это внимание. Здесь тоже не буду подробно останавливаться, так как сессия сегодня у нас есть посвященная данному вопросу, и коллега из штаб-квартиры как раз представит презентацию на эту тему. По задаче 4.6, которая направлена на универсальное развитие навыков, грамотности в чтении и счете, то здесь следует отметить, что в странах Центральной Азии этот уровень грамотности, он почти близок к 100%, независимо от возраста, и при этом был достигнут гендерный паритет. Однако здесь также все еще есть вопросы, которые касаются качества программ, а также признания неформального и информального образования. Ну и в целом странам необходимо уделить внимание на то, чтобы разрабатывать и внедрять концепции обучения на протяжении всей жизни, так как мы знаем, навыки, знания, они с каждым днем, с каждым разом обновляются. Ну и по задаче 4.7, которая направлена на развитие навыков и компетенций для устойчивого развития через такие концепции, как образование в интересах устойчивого развития и образование в духе глобальной гражданственности, то здесь также необходимо отметить, что есть позитивные реформы.
Evidenced by the countries which implement the competence-based approach to education, but still attention is needed to be paid to such skills related to sustainable development and careful attitude to the nature, to the earth, to the planet, in order to live in peace with each other, and it still needs attention. And the last target, which is called means and mechanisms to attain other targets of SDG4. So target 4.8 related to educational infrastructures. Here we need just to note that certain level of progress is observed, is attained. However, if it relates to ICT infrastructure or communication infrastructure, of course, most affected are rural areas, which do not show overall coverage, complete coverage. But when we're talking about learning environment, we are talking about the ensuring safe in a learning environment without discrimination, with zero discrimination, zero violence, zero bullying. And in this regard, countries need to take measures to ensure safe and secure a learning environment for all learners and students. As far as target 4.b is concerned, which relates to the improvement of access to higher education, we can observe that in the countries of Central Asia, number of scholarships that are allocated for to get access for higher education so increasing, but there are gaps between countries, and in some countries there is no mass holistic access to the higher education. And the last task related to the improvement of or increase of numbers of qualified and high-skilled teachers. We still face a lack of high-skilled teachers, which is the main barrier to the quality education. And it was said during the previous presentation by the Ministry of Education and Science of Kazakhstan that there are certain actions taken in this regard, and we hope that the profession of a teacher will be in higher demand, and there will be more and more skilled and qualified teachers, which would ensure quality education for all. And the last that I would like to say in conclusion, that in order to attain SDG, specifically to attain SDG4, more and more attention is needed to be paid to the equality, equity and inclusion. So the systems should be flexible in order to ensure resilience. So it would be just based on equity and inclusion, and we have to remove barriers that just preclude equity and deteriorate quality of education. I'm not going to just talk about everything. I think that you have all this presentation available after the event on the website. But I would like to say that it is necessary to increase investments and not just terminate funding of education, thus ensuring equal and fair allocation of resources based on a progressive and universal approach, so that nobody is left behind. Thank you very much for your attention. That's the end of my presentation.
You are muted.
Thank you very much for presentation, Ms. Mergu. It was very interesting and complex overview of situation in the region. And let's move forward. We believe that education is a very complex issue, very important issue, but in order to understand how to effectively deal with educational changes, reforms, and dealing with situation what we have in the education sector right now, we have to deconstruct a whole sector into small sections. Say, for example, preschool, school education, higher education, professional education. And we are starting right now from the beginning, and the next discussion will be about preschool education. Before introducing the next session, I would like to call all speakers, please strictly follow a schedule, strictly follow a timetable, and making sure that we have enough time for our entire session, making sure that we don't leave anyone behind without opportunity to speak, because we have a specific time window for all our presentations. And now we are moving to presentations on preschool education. We will see overview of preschool education in the sub-region, highlighting recent trends and potentially overlooked areas for national policy improvement and multi-stakeholder involvement in areas such early school education and care, teachers training, and retainment, as well as financing. So our first speaker, Ms. Evelina Borisova, Early Childhood Development Advisor for Europe and Central Asia. Floor is yours. Please follow the timetable.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to double check if organizers are able to play the video at the start of the presentation. We had a brief video to kind of break up the discussion. If that's still possible, that would be wonderful.
Yes, it is. Please.
Some children have a better start in life than others. Some get to go to preschool, where they gain valuable skills, while others do not. In preschool, these children learn, play, imagine, create, socialize, and build the foundations for future learning. But half of children who should be in preschool are missing that opportunity. That doesn't have to be their destiny. Giving every child a high-quality early education brings enormous benefits for society and is the key to a better future. But most countries are still far from reaching that goal. There are three big challenges countries will have to tackle. The first one is ensuring equitable access. Preschools should be free and available to all children. Governments should prioritize early childhood education in their education plans, and education policies should break down equity barriers to reach all children, including those living in poverty, in isolated communities, with disabilities, or affected by emergencies and conflict. Another huge challenge is ensuring the quality of preschool education. Governments need to build sustainable systems for early childhood education that can deliver quality at scale. This includes setting and meeting quality standards, growing the workforce, and ensuring support to all preschools so they can provide quality early childhood education. Finally, countries and the international community will need to make early childhood education a budget priority. Governments should allocate at least 10% of their education resources to early childhood education to develop strong preschool systems. And donors should reallocate their investments to ensure that at least 10% of their education funds are focused on preschool, and that these funds are used to catalyze and complement public resources. These changes won't happen overnight. If we're going to reach the goal of universal access by the year 2030, we need to take immediate and bold action to place all children on the path to success and address the global learning crisis at its roots. Governments, donors, partners, teachers, families, and communities. Together, the time to act is now. For more information on how to be a part of this change, please visit us online.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I think with that good introduction, I think we're ready to move into the session on where are we with preschool education right now in the sub-region, and I'm hoping that you can see my screen.
Yes,
could you just confirm? Excellent.
Yeah, I'd like to confirm, yes. Please
wonderful,
follow the
thank
schedule.
you so much. Wonderful. Except, yes, I'm controlling my slides. Apologies for just trying to work through the digital divide here on our side as well. I think so many of the speakers already have set the stage wonderfully in terms of why we have a little segment on preschool education for the region, given how much work we still need to do in this space, and also given that COVID, I think, set us back in some ways. I think I will try to be very brief because I believe the video was very informative in terms of the key challenges that all countries are facing, and I think this includes the countries in this region as well. But maybe just to start, because I know the video was in English and perhaps not everybody managed to understand everything in it. It's very easy to summarize why investment and prioritization in preschool education is so important. It's critical for the child. It sets the right foundation for their future. It's critical for education systems. And I know we have colleagues from ministries of education with us today. There's numerous studies showing that investing in preschool education saves resources of education systems going forward. So it helps bring efficiency and effectiveness into whole education systems. And very importantly, it's good for society. So it brings long-term benefits to society in terms of productivity, job opportunities, and so many other benefits. We know all of this. We've known this for a long time, and yet it's one of these areas where progress is really slow. And as we like to say, the agenda is quite unfinished. And I think quite a few colleagues have referred to this throughout the previous presentations before me. And really, acceleration in this subsector is critical to meet the development goals under the SDG, and especially post-COVID. Preschool education is one of the subsectors that has always been a bit kind of underfunded, not always in the forefront of education sector plans. And I think what we have seen through COVID with potential budget cuts for some of the areas within education is a big concern that that will remain the case, and that in fact some of the progress that we have started to see is now going to be lost. So it's really wonderful to have the opportunity to talk about this together, and as some colleagues have mentioned, to have a more kind of bold and partnership type approach towards making the right steps forward. What is the current situation in the region based on most recent figures? Many of you probably are familiar with the data. Other than a few countries in this region, most of the governments are not quite on track in terms of meeting the SDG goal for universal access to preschool education. So we see some really, really low access rates across the region. And some countries, I wasn't able to show trends, haven't really moved very fast in the last 5 to 10 years, which I think is also concerning. But I want you to also think about this not just in terms of percentages, but also in terms of children. Low access to preschool is really one of the greatest missed opportunities to really cultivate the world's human potential, and there's numerous evidence studies showing that, and to allow children to reach their developmental potential overall. And when you look at these numbers in terms of numbers of children, we have close to 2 million children in some of the countries not accessing preschool. This is huge numbers of children who are missing out on opportunities, and really call for action for what we could be doing better as partners and as governments to make sure that that's not the case. The unfinished agenda is also about equity, and I think many of us have talked about this already throughout the session. Universal access means universal access for every child, including children coming from vulnerable families, from poverty, as well as children with disabilities. And by and large, we continue to see across countries for whom we have data that poverty is one of the strongest factors excluding children from preschool. And it also calls on us to think about what are additional strategies and interventions that we might need to ensure that the children who need those services most are actually accessing them. I think when we talk about planning for preschool, we have to really think about how do our plans address some of these barriers that we know are already present in our systems. And you can see in the countries with data that is very much the case. The inequity between kind of rich and poor households is massive in terms of access to preschool education. I don't want to scare you, but we have done some projections on our side, and it does seem that across the board at the current pace, and this was prior to COVID, none of the countries, very few of the countries, I should say, are on track to reach the SDG target for universal access by 2030, which really behooves us in thinking about how do we accelerate progress and what is needed in terms of political commitment, financing, and building systems that actually can be long-lasting as well. I want to spend just my last 2 minutes, and I know we have very short time, so I'm trying to stick to the schedule, is talking about what are the bold measures that we might need to take. And yes, financing is one of them, and you'll hear me talk about this in a minute. But the bigger bold measure is really thinking about preschool not outside of education sector plans and services, but thinking about preschool subsector as a system that is part and parcel of how the whole education system functions and how it transitions children from preschool into primary. A lot of times we see that while there's political momentum and commitment in the enabling environment, we're struggling with standards for preschool education, with workforce quality, ensuring that all preschool teachers have the relevant skills, capacity building opportunities, and really up-to-date kind of know-hows, which we think are critical, especially as we have seen with COVID. And most importantly, kind of modernized and really up-to-date curriculum and ways that we know children learn and that can be brought to life nowadays. We know that a lot of great reforms are already taking place in the region, and there's a lot to learn between countries, but it's also pulling these reforms together into a coherent system and plan for preschool education is what we believe would really help make the progress possible in this area. And now a word on financing, because it's always about budget. And I think you heard very clearly in the video that unless we make preschool education a budget priority, it's very unlikely that we're going to see the progress needed. And we're far still in this region from being able to say that preschool is a budget priority in education sector budgets. We know there's so many competing budget lines, and it would be really great to also hear reflections, if there's space, in the second part of the session from government officials about how they're prioritizing and budgeting for expansion of preschool services. But at the moment, preschool continues to be one of the lowest investments across the subsectors and the lowest per child investment in the education system, even though we know that that investment is actually the one that drives success for children going forward. So we're certainly not working off of the evidence that we have in terms of how we make choices going forward. And I want to end with just a few recommendations. I encourage you, and I will share, we have a report on this, and there's much more thorough recommendations around how to advance access to preschool education. But first and foremost, as I mentioned, is moving preschool from the margins of sector plans towards their center. And it really takes a lot of political will and commitment. And again, it's wonderful to be here together and to have a multi-stakeholder and partnership approach to making that happen. The second is really maintaining the commitment to universal access by 2030, but ensuring that as we do that, we're prioritizing the most marginalized and hard to reach populations in our planning cycles. And I know that's not easy, but I know also some countries are managing to do that very successfully. And it's wonderful that there's best practices already in the region on this. Third, quality. We can't wait for quality to happen after access. We have to make sure that we're building systems that can deliver quality from the get-go. And again, I think it's a key principle that we can keep in mind as we develop some of these key competencies for teachers and standards. Strengthening capacity of the whole system at national, local, and kind of sub-local level as well. Massively important to deliver on this priority regionally as well as globally. And of course, increasing financing, and being driven by common vision, which I believe we share already, given everything that everyone has shared so far. With that, I'm moving on to the next speaker, and over to you, Mr. Abazov. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive overview of the topic, Ms. Evelina, and for keeping schedule also. It's very important. Next speaker is Mr. Thomas Raringer, analyst, Early Childhood Education and Care, Directorate for Education and Skill, OECD. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, speaker, and thanks for the invitation to share some perspectives and complement Evelina's overview of the region with some OECD data. I'm going to pull up some slides as well. I hope you can all see and hear me. So yeah, providing some data on the OECD. If we look first at access, we see that significant progress has been made over the last 15 years. So this slide shows data from 2005, the black diamond, to 2019, the blue bars. So while some countries like France, the UK, Israel on the left have traditionally had high enrollments for the age group of preschool, so 3 to 5 year olds. Some other countries have really caught up. So looking at Poland, for example, or Latvia and Lithuania, which are now above the OECD average. But also progress has been made for the youngest children, so from birth to 3 years of age. So as you can see here, for example, Korea, which is now the top performer on this metric, but also Finland. So these are data and the progress between 2015 and 2019. But as the slide also clearly shows, for this youngest age group, which is so important, in some countries really no progress has been made. So for example, on the right, like Italy, and even in some countries like Denmark and Hungary, participation of the youngest children has actually decreased. As Evelina also mentioned, for the region, sustained public financial support is critical, both for the growth and the quality of ECEC, and to ensure that parental fees and contributions remain at a tolerable level, but also to invest in teachers, infrastructure, and so forth. So at the OECD, if we look at the spending on the sector as a percentage of GDP, so in terms of wealth, so across OECD countries, 0.9% of GDP are invested in ECEC. However, we see 2/3 of this is actually on pre-primary. However, we also see here significant differences, which are also influenced by the importance, but also other factors like demographics, of course, or the intensity of participation. So countries on the left, like Norway, Sweden, Iceland, and Chile, invest more than 1% of their GDP in pre-primary, which is the blue bar here. Other countries like the UK, the Netherlands, Japan, 0.5 or less percent of their GDP. However, that's also something that Evelina has really want to highlight clearly also from our work. Access is obviously one aspect, but really it's about the quality that children experience in terms of their interactions in preschool and early childhood education and care, be it interactions among children with staff and parents and the wider community. Policy might seem quite far from these interactions that happen in ECEC settings. However, so this is a conceptual framework that shows how policy can actually support these meaningful and enriching interactions, starting from quality standards, governance and financing, to curriculum and pedagogy, which is supported by quality workforce and monitoring and data and family and community engagement. And delving a bit deeper into workforce development, here's a few key aspects and lessons that are emerging from work among OECD countries. So this starts, of course, with quality initial education and for all types of staff. So we've seen differences between teachers and assistants, for example, with standards being higher for teachers than for assistants, but all staff require sufficient practical experience through their training that also covers a broad range of contents, including curriculum implementation. And that then continues with support for participation in quality professional development for staff. So here time is a critical factor, as we've seen, and in many systems, staff do not have sufficient time for activities outside of the work with children. So they have to participate in learning in the evenings, on weekends, which hinders learning informally or formally. Working conditions and leadership are two further factors that should receive sufficient attention to retain and develop a quality workforce. And then let me conclude with one quick slide with lessons from COVID. This comes actually from a survey, the results of which were only published yesterday. So this is hot off the press. This is a survey of G20 countries. So we surveyed 30 countries on the experience that they have had during the COVID pandemic, using ICT and different technologies to continue providing children with quality early childhood education and care, and during closures of their centers. And so we looked at the first years in primary education and comparing that also with pre-primary education. And we see some interesting differences actually. So whereas, for example, in both levels, technology was used to keep communication with parents alive, to share materials. In pre-primary education, technology was used to a much greater extent to actually facilitate the learning of children. And going forward, we also asked administrators in countries about the key priorities to better integrate technology in early education. And here really countries are planning to invest significantly more in training for teachers, in addition to other steps such as developing adequate learning materials and keeping children safe also in digital environments. So I hope this provided an interesting perspective, complementing Evelina's perspective on the region. Thank you very much.
Mr. Abazov, I think you're on mute, so we cannot hear you.
Happens. It automatically happens. Sorry again. Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. It's very important to have numbers to better understand trends and where we move and what kind of budget we have in our disposals to deal with challenges in the field of education, in our case, in the case of preschool education. You know, as a moderator, I have a very difficult choice. I have to keep schedule and at the same time make sure that every speaker who participate in our session, who prepared wonderful presentations, who prepared for discussions, have choice and chance and opportunity to speak. Our session, unfortunately, a bit late, and I would like to invite our discussants to introduce their ideas, but I would like to invite them as a moderator. I would like to give them a chance, but at the same time, as a moderator, I would like to ask them to keep everything short and maybe provide bullet points to make sure that we will be keeping our schedule and we'll be on track. So we have discussants discussing preschool education we have contributions from leading experts in early childhood education from the region. So we have here Miss Yelena Tan, Miss Gauhar Kikova, and Miss Aygul Kamalova. I would like to invite all of you to speak very briefly and maybe give just outline, bullet points of your ideas and contribute to discussion session now, please. Miss Yelena Tan, Miss Gauhar Kikova.
Good afternoon, everyone. Since our representative of our ministry has already spoken today, I will only give a couple of brief points that I think should be really outlined and emphasized. So in Kazakhstan, there has historically been less attention paid to the quality of early childhood education, mostly to the enrollment rate of preschools. And we have only recently started building our own agenda on quality of early childhood education and turning to the international experience and research. But as it was mentioned today, quality is most important when we speak of early childhood education. And it's not just enrollment rates, but also quality that is very important for the children to succeed. So first of all, for Kazakhstan and for other countries, one of our recommendations is building a good, sound, evidence-based quality standard system, so that the countries, that the preschools know what to follow, where to strive, and how to develop. That's one of the things. Another, as a researcher, I find it difficult to find sufficient information and numbers on early childhood education in open resources in Kazakhstan. So specifically, maybe for our country, since I'm an independent researcher and head of an NGO, we would propose to our government to have more data, to publish data, to find out how children, staff, and parents are coping and how to support them best in these times of pandemic, because we don't really have that information available to us. And final point is that we want to say to the preschools and to the government is prioritizing social and emotional learning and children's well-being. In these hard times of stress, we will all definitely focus on secondary education, and not only for preschoolers, but also for schoolers. We definitely need to address that and include more play, allow for more play as children return to their preschools and schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gauhar, for your bullet points. It's again, it's great that you have bullet points and keep our program on schedule. And you know, I always admire work of teachers, because on the front of our work, and they really work with children, and they actually have first-hand experience. And it's my great pleasure to invite Ms. Aygul Kamalova, who is teacher from Kyrgyzstan. Please, floor is yours. And again, please keep your presentation short and, if possible, making bullet points. Thank you.
Спасибо.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good day, distinguished colleagues. Before my presentation, I would like to provide some brief information on the preschool education in Kyrgyzstan. Studies were carried out mixed with the Unicef support. The situation of preschool coverage in Kyrgyzstan is rather good. Over 22% as of 2014. As of 2018, so that figure was approximately 37%. But like in other countries, a post-COVID situation shows that access to preschool education is not enjoyed by all children. Specifically, this is true for rural areas, for remote areas, for children with disabilities. But in this regard, in Kyrgyzstan, I just had a meeting with a representative of the Ministry of Education. We have data which are published on the website of the National Statistics Committee of Kyrgyzstan. During this period, post-COVID period, Kyrgyzstan is developing a strategy of, or has developed a strategy of education development through 2040. And we've managed to include such issues, such good things as ensuring accessibility through alternative forms of preschool education, like short-term 3-hour kindergartens, where no inputs are needed from, or contributions are needed from parents, and the centers of child development at the basis of libraries, which was offered by the government of Kyrgyzstan. As I know, the Ministry of Education is developing a program of involving into these centers like early age children and up below 3 years old, and children with disabilities, because parents will accompany their children to these centers. And so I would like just to share our success story, like creating a digital platform and the mobile applications for parents, and this teaching passport. This teaching passport is planned by the ministry just as a platform for materials to be just for children and for parents to improve the quality of education versus the current situation, because approximately 11% of all the teachers in preschools have specific skills. In addition, there are a lot of challenges, such as lack of skills, working with the work with internet resources, very low coverage with preschool education. There are issues in higher education and tertiary education and trainer. As a teacher in the college or trainer in the college, I can say that social provision of trainers, this social consideration is not attractive for students to gain this profession. Another issue is improvement of skills. In Kyrgyzstan, only National Institute of Skills Improvement, Qualification Improvement is in charge of this. But such issues are still persistent in Kyrgyzstan, in line with our achievements. If you have any questions, ready to take them. Thank you very much.
Very short and very interesting presentation about situation and the latest development in Kyrgyzstan. You know, again, as a moderator, I have to make difficult choices. I would like to have very lively discussion, making sure that everyone, those who have questions and they have opportunity to ask and get answers. But unfortunately, time is very tight. I would like to invite everyone who would like to speak, to ask questions or to have comments and suggestions. Put your questions, suggestions, comments into our chat. It's very active, and definitely people can look at your questions and answer if and when they have a chance. And therefore, I apologize and would like to move forward to our next session. Again, just summarizing our session about preschool education, it's a very important part, and to deal with children, like smallest participants of education development, and we are, I believe, had very productive discussions and very productive and informative presentations on that issue. And now our session about equitable education, access to learning services. This session discusses aspects of access to and quality of education, namely digitalization, inclusion, and rural-urban education gaps are very important, very challenging topics, and we have a wonderful group of presenters. First, let me invite Ms. Anna Cristina Adio, Senior Policy Analyst, Thematic Lead, Global Educational Monitoring Report. The floor is yours, please.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for having me here. It's really, I would like also to thank all the already the speakers for the very interesting and insightful presentation. I think there are some slides that should be on screen, but I will start quickly by saying that for those who do not know the Global Education Monitoring Report, we are a team working at UNESCO that has the mandate of the international community to monitor progress on education in the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. And some of the results I will present here come out of the report on Central and Eastern Europe, Caucasus and Central Asia on inclusion in education we have published this year. And in partnership with the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education and the National Education Policy Centers. Next slide, please. All countries, you can have seen that the title of this report in general is All Means All. And in fact, all countries have committed to inclusive education when they signed up for SDG4 to be achieved by 2030. And we cannot really afford to lose sight of this commitment because the case of it has become stronger. And the GEM report has defined inclusion, as UNESCO did already, as a process that celebrates diversity and builds a sense of belonging to achieve social cohesion. And these actions are rooted in the belief that every person has value and potential. And so it is neither about discriminating nor rejecting anyone. It is instead about adapting to learner, making accommodation, and not about the learners adapting to the system. We know that over time, the case for inclusion has been championed mainly by those supporting the rights of people with disabilities who have tried to ensure the right to inclusive education is guaranteed in international law. But inclusion is clearly not about one group because the mindset and the mechanism that generate discrimination and exclusion and projections are the same for all those excluded. Next slide, please. Just briefly, the sources for this report have been mainly through the country profiles of inclusion and education that have been prepared also by experts in the region, and you can find them on the educationprofiles.org website. Next slide, please. And Central and Eastern Europe, the Caucasus and Central Asia has really made a lot of progress towards a right-based approach to inclusive education. In the past 20 years, education levels that were already among the world's highest have increased rapidly, and out-of-school rates fell by half over the past 20 years. And countries have also been moving away from the medical model of disability. The percentage of children with disabilities in special schools fell from 78% in 2005-06 to 53% in 2015-16. And the percentage of children in residential institutions fell by 30% in the same period. And schools are making their support system broader and more flexible. And among the 30 education systems reviewed, 23 offer counseling and mentoring, 22 learning assistance, and 21 specialist and therapist support. Next slide, please. Education opportunities, however, are still very unequally distributed, and the shift to inclusion is really far from complete because many countries in the region have yet to shed the legacy of segregated education. Overall, 1 in 3 students with special needs in Central and Eastern Europe are still placed in special schools. In Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, and Mongolia, for instance, the share of youth with disabilities in the out-of-school population is twice as large as the share of the in-school population. In 15 of the 30 education systems, school admission depends on medical psychological assessments and other selection procedures. And very often what passes for inclusive pedagogy may instead be a medically defined focus on disability. In Belarus, for instance, integrated classes use 2 curricula, a standard one for general education and another one for special education. And joint instruction for the groups is limited to a narrow list of subjects. But other forms of segregation and discrimination persist, and thus they hinder inclusion. For instance, about 60% of Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian youth in the Balkans do not attend upper secondary school. And members of these groups are also disproportionately diagnosed with intellectual disabilities. In Slovakia, Roma constitutes 42% of those in special schools in 2018. In Mongolia, 94% of the richest, but only 37% of the poorest complete secondary school. And Turkey, which has the world's highest number of refugees and absorbed more than 600,000 Syrians in its public school, has only 37% of Syrian refugees that are out of school. In 21 of the 30 education system, there are separate schools of classes for linguistic minorities. And in 7 of 23 countries, there are policies or action plans that are explicitly addressing and prohibiting school bullying based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Next, please. The data issue is a very important one because which data are collected and how they are used determine whether inclusion is served. And historically, the region has focused data collection efforts on learners with special education needs and disabilities. Identify groups helps make those who are disadvantaged visible, but it can also reduce children to labels, which can be self-fulfilling. So it's very important to have data for inclusion related data collection, covering inputs, processes, outputs, and outcomes and on all learners and for multiple users, not just for resource allocation. Next, please. The report, and this is a very important recommendation, calls on all countries to widen the understanding of inclusive education to encompass all learners, regardless of identity, background, or ability. However, in the region, for instance, in laws and other documents, 19 of the 30, or 2 in 3 education system review in the region define special education needs in relation to disabilities, while 12 also include a variety of other learning groups. So these tend to be mainly gifted learners. By contrast, 23 of the 36 systems, also 2 in 3, have a definition inclusion in laws and other documents, of which 20 focus on multiple marginalized groups beyond the learners with special education needs on disability. Next, please. It's very important. So the GEM report has a series of recommendations. I have no time to go through that. So I just look at some of that quickly. One that's really important is to put students at the center, because inclusion is not just a result, it's first and foremost a process and experience. And this is really education, making the point that education of good quality is not just about delivering academic success. The right to be in good physical and mental health, happy, safe, and connected with others is as important as the right to learn. And this makes monitoring students' experience vital. Cross-national learning achievement surveys show that about 2 in 10 children feel like outsiders in school on average, with shares ranging from 1 in 10 in Albania to 3 in 10 in Bulgaria. Next. It's also very important, next slide please. It's also very important to engage in meaningful consultation with communities and parents, as inclusion cannot be enforced from above. And this is really something that we found very important and fundamental. In fact, a key barrier to inclusion in education is lack of belief that this is possible and desirable. And the parents, guardians, families, and communities may have discriminatory attitudes with respect to gender, disability, ethnicity, or religion. And this is so, it's very important to work to dismantle these attitudes and these barriers. And for this is really crucial to make space also for non-government actors to challenge and fill the gaps, and they ensure that they work together, all together towards the same inclusion goal. Next, please. And share and the issue of exchanging experience on implementation barriers and bridging the gaps between policies and practices is also a crucial one. And despite the strong message of General Comment 4 on Article 24 of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, separate provision based not only on disability, but also on ethnicity and language persist throughout the region. And this means that policies must be supported by a strategy or plan that clearly sets out the intentions and the actions and the resources required to achieve them. Strategies or action plans for inclusive education exist in 21 of the 30 education system reviewed in the region. But very often the laws and policies remain disconnected from schools and classroom practice realities. Planning is often weak and fails to put learners at the center. And finally, next, it's important to ensure cooperation across government, departments, sector, and tiers. Inclusion in education is really something that is necessary to achieve social cohesion. And next slide. As I was saying, what is really important is to share expertise and resources, because this is the only way to sustain a transition to inclusion. To conclude, it's really important to think about teachers. Yesterday it was the World Teacher Day, and it's necessary to, beyond to apply the universal design, to think about empowering teachers and make them ready to teach everyone, and to teach and not to make distinction between the students, and ensure diversity and dismantle the teachers' attitudes. Thanks a lot. I will stop here because I think the time is going, and I want to be sure that others will have the time to speak. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Anna Kristina. Q&A this session. Again, I would like to call everyone who would like to ask questions, and if you feel comfortable, please use our chat board and ask questions, put your comments over there. But without further ado, we will move our discussion session, and we have about 15 minutes for it. First, Ms. Zahira Begalieva, Director of iTeachMe Competence Development Center from Kazakhstan. Floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. Many thanks for having me at this forum and giving me opportunity to talk about our activities on achieving SDG on inclusive education. Our organization is focusing on provisioning additional education for people with disabilities, young people with disabilities in Kazakhstan. I would like to start my slides. We're not seeing your presentation yet, not yet.
Сейчас выходит, да, теперь вышло.
Yes, now it's visible. Public Association, I teach. Our mission, we create equal capability, opportunities, and open potential of each person, thus teaching modern professions, inspiring everyone to be the best version of himself or herself. So what can be done based on new technologies in the we have copyright for this. What have been done during this period? We had 5 seasons where we trained over 270 people in the teacher's profession. We just carried out 20 events in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. We have 5 adapted courses, training courses. We will have more than 100 publications in mass media, and we have over 60 partners. Target audience, persons with disability, youth from the category of orphans, teenagers from families with low income and those who want to pay for the courses. What issues are covered by us in our work? We just provide the opportunity of hinderless and free of charge vocational education in the digital area for our target population. We just promote reduction of gender inequality. We just create access for all persons and promote financial independence. How we do it? First stage is Leader Z. So this is a vocational online school for teenagers with specific educational needs. When we used to work with adult audience, we could understand that so for people with disabilities, they did not get enough education in school years. Their knowledge quality is rather poor, leaves much to be desired. And when they just pass to pass I teach level, they cannot just be equal, enjoy equal opportunities with those who got better education. Our first students had only 3 years of school education when they wanted to get vocational school. So the first stage is modular graphics, sketching, scratch, and STEAM. The second stage is like young youth who just students in our I teach school. So we attain integration into society, hard skills, soft skills, and we provide assistance in employment. So we did not start from scratch. We just served over 700 people with disabilities. So we just asked about their level of education, and we found out that 12% have no secondary education, 50% have no base IT skills, but 72% are willing to get these skills. And we asked then the employers what skills they need. And so the main idea is that so the people have to be willing to learn and to have soft skills. What courses we have? Motion design, so UI design, copywriting, graphic design, and modular graphics. In addition, we provide support to business sector so that our students will feel comfortable in any environment, in business environment. And we have good partnership with governmental authorities, with the Ministry of Social Protection, and Ministry of Education, Ministry of Employment. So these are our contacts. I would say that 87% of our alumni are just employed. Some of them just got their wages, their salary for the first time when they completed our courses. Thank you for your attention. That's all from my part. Should you have any questions, ready to take them?
Thank you very much for a very interesting case study. Спасибо, госпожа Захира. Очень интересная презентация, очень интересный материал.
Very interesting presentation, very interesting material, and thanks again for your work. I suggest that we pass over to the next speaker now.
Next speaker will be Mr. Aziz Soltabayev. He is co-founder Kyrgyz Internet Society from Kyrgyzstan. Floor is yours.
Большое за приглашение и возможность выступить.
Thank you very much for this invitation and opportunity to talk. I'm Aziz Soltabayev. I'm just co-founder of Kyrgyz Internet Society, Kyrgyzstan. Within our activities, we carried out significant work in the area of education. In particular, we just supplied internet in boxes, so specific boxes containing academic learning materials, Khan Academy, so and Wikipedia that we just delivered to the remote areas in Kyrgyz Republic, so that people pupils in Kyrgyz schools who have smartphones could get knowledge, because we face lack of teachers and textbooks in Kyrgyzstan. As a response to the pandemic, we developed an educational platform in books that just allow access to all children to internet, through internet to school curricula across the country. We just prepared and adapted training material, teaching materials for forms 7 to 10 in the Kyrgyz Republic, so that pupils can attain, can have access. So this is a solution for children who cannot just go to school due to lockdown. So pupils can just enter this platform, pass certain lessons and the tests, and they be in line with the current curriculum. And this solution helps them. When implementing our projects, we found out that the curriculum and training materials that were provided by the Ministry of Education were rather hard. They were not just adapted for digital purpose, digital format. Some of them just were containing graphic files. So they were rather heavy, like 600 megabyte history of Kyrgyzstan only, and we just shrinked it to 20 megabyte, for example. It's quite important from the point of view of access to accessibility of teaching materials and training materials for because quite often people have like limited access to internet, and so smartphone is rather limited. So therefore we could just shrink and compress certain textbooks. Therefore pupils can get better access to textbooks, and they are capable of just following the machine reading forms and find things necessary in the text. Kyrgyzstan responded to the pandemic quite successfully. A lot of video lessons were published for pupils and students, but still civil society just met their needs, and mobile operators provided some resources, accessible resources. So, but many of these platforms just are accessible only through YouTube, and so that could the traffic was quite limited. And we tried to make so that all those files, like gigabytes, were just compressed to 20 megabyte and would be accessible for pupils. Can I ask people just to turn off microphones? Sorry, microphone is muted. So as far as many teachers and professors from higher education institutions were able to get access to developing curricula and teaching materials, and we provide these skills to them, so that Kyrgyzstan and adjacent countries could attain SDGs within 2030 agenda. So educational standards should be reconsidered in mixed education, hybrid education, including elements of ICT elements, where so we have only on basic level, and in this regard standards should be revised so that IT could be used in educational programs and curricula. All teaching materials have to meet technical and pedagogical standards, or technical standards, which should be just subject to machine reading, which should be machine readable. And IT does not replace science. Therefore, we would like to see in the curricula teaching soft skills through IT. IT creates opportunity for collaboration between school pupils, for creating joint projects. And this is what is needed to be done by educational specialists, experts, instead of just asking pupils to prepare some like essays or just presentations. It should rely on such collaboration, and we think that these actions, these measures would allow us to attain SDG goals. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Aziz Soltobayev, for a very productive and interesting presentation. And now we pass over to the next speaker.
She is Director for Laboratory for Educational Innovation, Research, Higher School of Economics, Russian Federation. Floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much. Honestly, I'm very happy to speak after the previous speakers because I believe they represent a very interesting cases of grassroots innovation, what I would like to speak about in my speech. I didn't know in which language to prepare a presentation, so I will play two games, two teams. So my speech will be in English and my presentation will be in Russian, if you don't mind. Let me start the presentation. Can you see my slides?
Okay. Yes, we can see it. Yes,
great.
It's here on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I believe today I was saying a lot about like global challenges for education system, and I would like to speak about possible solution. I would like to speak about grassroots innovation and give as an example EdTech market, EdTech startups as a source for a new source of energy for education system. If we speak about global challenges for education system, it is important to note that COVID-19 kind of show up and compounded the existing problems of education market and brought new challenges to education system around the world. While the actual question today is how to help to education systems around the world meet these new challenges with the limited resources, because we know that quite often these new challenges were announced in the situation of limited resources. And I believe that any education system in the world today is looking for the new source of energy, which can help it to transform and to go through this crisis. And one of the solutions here, which I would like to speak about today, it could be a grassroots innovations. Innovations which born not on the top level, so not innovations from top down, but bottom up innovations which has a origin and roots in the educational organization, for example, schools, universities, preschools, education, but definitely needed to be supported by government, by non-government organization, and so on. As a head of research laboratory, we are doing a competition for educational innovation already 8 years, which allow us to analyze the landscape of educational innovations, not only in Russia, but also in CIS countries. And it gives us opportunity to speak about the landscape, challenges, and sources which needed for educational innovations in those countries. I would like to show you a few examples of these educational innovations and try to explain why I think that this is a good source for formal education, for covering its gaps in the education sector. So here you see the three examples of educational innovations which were applying for our competition First, it is a special school for migrant children in Moscow, which was opened by a Russian citizen with roots from Kyrgyzstan, who organized the school for children and their parents to be prepared for formal education sector, for formal school education in Russia. This is a very, very big challenge for Russian education and Moscow education especially, which I believe formal education didn't cover by itself. And his support, his idea, his innovation was very welcome by formal education. This preparation allowed children and their parents without a big problem to be incorporated in a formal education system. Second example, which I would like to show you, it is a project from Kazakhstan. This year we tried to organize this competition with a special track in Kazakhstan, and we receive projects from this country. And one of the projects is a Smart Grades. It is a mobile app which help children and their parents monitor their learning achievement. So again, it is a very interesting solution which can be implemented by formal education system, because I believe the question of like monitoring for the achievement, analyzing the big data and so on, it is also very, very important topic for all education system. And the third project, which I want to briefly introduce, it is a project which it is again EdTech. It's an app which help children and parents in the homework preparation. It is, I believe, also very big issue for all parents, how to organize this homework with their children, and this app help them in this way. So if we speak about the challenges and problems of this formal and non-formal sector communication, I would say that the formal education system kind of ignoring the educational startups on macro level. So quite often formal education system don't see this very rapid development market and trying to not speak about it at all. While on the meso level, if I speak about schools, universities, preschool organization, educators don't know how to work with this source. They don't have sources for it. They don't have clear tools how to incorporate it in their practice. That's why quite often educators itself on a micro level, if we speak about teachers, for example, they work with this EdTech kind of in the shadow. So they don't announce it, don't do it on a formal level, but they use it in schools, in classrooms. And quite often the main drivers of this like EdTech, it is the parents, and they pay for using these EdTech apps and so on. So it's instead of prevent inequality in education, it's bring inequality, because not all families can afford this EdTech. If we speak about what education sector...
Diana, I would like to apologize to you. It's time is over 4 minutes already, and we have very tight schedule, and we have some householding issues.
Yes, I'm sorry. Let
me
me
allow you just maybe like 20 seconds to wrap up your main ideas.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. So yeah, let me miss the slides. Let me go to conclusion. I would say that while we're searching for this new source of in education, we can have a look on this EdTech market, which developing quite quickly and which can cover the gaps which normally has a formal education system. So in cooperation, formal and informal education systems can reach the goal for sustainable development. That's my short conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you very much to all. We had again a very wonderful discussion about equitable access to learning services. We had the keynote presenter and we had the discussants, and I believe it was a very informative session. Now it's a couple of concluding remarks, and we can move forward. Number one, I would like to call everyone. I know we have a lot of questions, comments, and remarks. Please use chartboard and other opportunities to communicate. Number two, I would like to invite you to communicate on these issues. In academia, we always say conference and discussion or seminar is not the end. It's a beginning of productive intellectual discussion and intellectual debates just to start. And therefore, we please use this opportunity to know names of experts, know names of each other, and to communicate in future. So I would like to call Natalia Wechmer for a couple of concluding remarks and some household issues. Please, Natalia.
Thank you very much, Rafis. Actually, no concluding, just in terms of session organization. We do want to apologize to the presenters that we were rushing you a little bit, and also to the participants that you did not really have the opportunity to ask questions. We want to invite you, please, if you have any comments or questions, put them in the chat now, because we will send them to the speakers or try to answer ourselves, and we will respond to you in writing. Since you're all registered, we have your contact details, so please apologies for this. And now I would like to ask you, we have an evaluation form for every session. So the link is being posted into the chat. It's just 2 minutes, quick questions, as we have done for the other sessions. If you could kindly take those 2 minutes now to answer the evaluation questionnaire.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I cannot see. You can use it as a link, or you can use QR code. Please do it now.
Okay, I think we can wrap up, Mr. Rafiz.
All right, now it's my turn to wrap up our session. And my concluding remarks. I believe it was a very productive discussion, and we had a good conversation. You know, when educators, academia, representatives of academia, scholars, experts come together, it's very difficult to keep, you know, on time our presentations, because we have a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts to speak out and to speak about. And I hope we had productive discussions, and unfortunately we could not give you opportunity to all of you to ask questions, but we had the chartboard where you could raise your concerns, again ask questions, provide comments, and definitely organizers will use this opportunity to analyze all your comments and the feedbacks, and it will be analyzed and processed and used in future. Let me announce that our session is closed, and we are leaving it, and maybe Natalia will have final remark and comment.
Thank you so much, Rafiz, also to you. Thank you to all the speakers. I would just like to say that our next session, session 5 on SDG5, women's empowerment and gender equality, will start in around 2 minutes. So please, if you need a bio break or quickly grab a coffee, use this opportunity, and I see you back in a few minutes here. Thank you.
Thank you to all.